City of Stevens Point Public Protection Committee meeting, recorded January 14, 2019.
It is 6:21. The Public Protection Committee is called to order. We have perfect attendance. The first item on tonight's agenda is appeal of notice or service charge for property maintenance violations. We have 3 addresses, so we will start right with 1A at 1233 Fifth Avenue. I know the appellant is present. Did you want to come on up and state your name and address for the record, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm Lee Bartnick, and I live at 1233 Fifth Avenue here in Stevens Point.
Okay. Committee, do you have any questions for the?
Thank you. I'd like to ask, so did you have any idea how long you thought the grass was at that time?
Well, yes. We actually have a picture from 10/16 dated on my wife's phone, and I have a copy here where it was around 7 inches. But the reason that I'm disputing is not actually, I mean, that's part of it, but the real reason for my dispute is because, and I have talked to Mark Cordes about this a couple times, because as I've gone through the ordinances, I did not see an ordinance with which we were in violation. And I asked him on a couple of occasions for a specific ordinance, because the ones that I was cited for in the initial notice, which I think was back in September, I don't know the exact date, but the ordinances I was cited for were noxious weeds and harborage of rodents. And we did not have any of the noxious weeds that are listed in the ordinance, nor did we have any identified rodent harborage or any rodent issues on our property at all. And so that's the basis of the dispute, the general basis.
Any further questions? Thank you. Director, did you have anything to add?
So in addition to the 2 ordinance citations that are indicated in the letter, there's also a third one that's not indicated in the appeal. It's 2115-1A, deals with public nuisance. That's another one that it's considered. Typically with our grass violations, we go at about 8 inches because once we give the notice of violation, it could be up to 7 days before it's corrected, and 7 days during a wet climate. The grass is going to be fairly tall, which in this instance it was. As indicated in Mr. Cordes' memo, the property owner was given extensions to comply, but did not.
Thank you. Any questions for the director?
Not for the director.
Any comments or discussion from the audience? Yep.
Excuse me, sir, could you tell me why you didn't just mow it?
Well, initially, it was because we just moved into the property and we did not have a lawnmower. And so the first notice that we had gotten from him, which said, do this by, I think it gave, I can't remember the exact timeline it gave that time, or you will be charged. After which, I contacted Mark Cordes and said, you know, I need more details on the specific ordinance. And so on 10/8, I left him a voicemail of a request, please could you get back in touch with me? And then I left him an email on the 16th after not having heard from him for 8 days, to which he responded after that. And he left me a voicemail in the afternoon that said, this has to be done by tomorrow. And I'm a business owner. In the summer, I'm really busy, and that kind of timeline doesn't necessarily work for me. And as I mentioned, we have a picture dated on the 16th where the lawn was still under 8 inches long, and whereas this whole process started much before that. And so, and then on the 23rd, so a week after our picture was taken, we were charged 1.5 hours at the 18 or more inches rate, which it clearly was not. And if you want, I can show you the picture that we took, but I mean, the lawn did not grow 11 inches over the course of that week. And so we were charged a higher fee for 18 or more inches, and we were also charged $100 for an additional inspection, which I guess I'm not exactly sure what that would all entail. It seems like it could be a pretty straightforward thing to inspect. And so it kind of, initially, it was a matter of inconvenience and taking issue with the way that it was communicated, and then it became more a matter of principle.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, discussion among the committee? I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to deny the appeal.
A motion from Alder Phillips. Is there a second? From Alder Dugan. Any further discussion? All right, the motion is to deny the appeal. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that appeal is denied. Thank you. On to 1B, which is 439 Walker Street. Is the appellant present? Come on up. Please state your name. Do they have to say their address if their address is on here?
We should, just so people who can't read this,
Sure.
radio or TV maybe.
Please state your name and address for the record.
May and Lou Vang, 439 Walker Street.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the appellants from the committee? Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, we want to know if we are still due to pay for that. Because, I mean, I talked to him when he gave us extended time, because the car is not us, it's my daughter. And she keep contact other people, and they can't get the car out of our property. So he gave us until the 5th, but there's another, they sent out the citation on the 3rd already. I gave him a call and left him a message on the 4th and asked that he return a call so we can discuss the dispute, because we try to get the car out of the property as soon as we can. So we just,
Okay.
Is there a reason we do not have a letter like we usually get from Public Protection? From inspection on this case?
Director?
Did you notice that? No, it's not. Mark said.
There should be one, but I see it's not in the packet, but I can go ahead and read you what Mark had written.
Okay, thank you.
On 12/20 of 18, November 5th, 2018, a violation of a vehicle not parked on an approved hard surface was observed at 439 Walker, and orders to correct were sent the same day to the owner with a compliance date of November 16th. A call was received from the owner asking for an extension due date of the November 16th, and an extension was granted until December 3rd. A follow-up inspection occurred on December 3rd, and the vehicle was still observed to be parked and deemed to be on an unimproved hard surface. A $100 service fee was generated for the reinspection and continued non-compliance and sent the same day. The owner did call late on December 4th to request an additional extension until the 6th, as that was the salvage yard could get there to retrieve the vehicle. An extension would have been granted for compliance if the call had been received prior to the reinspection and subsequent service fee being sent out, but it was not. At the owner's request, it was reinspected on the 7th, and the case was then closed as the property was found to be in compliance and the car was gone.
Thank you, Director. Any
Thank
further
you.
questions for the Director? Any discussion, questions from the committee? Yeah, Alder Nebo?
I'm inclined to let this one go, because they did have the vehicle removed. It says here that they had until the 5th of December, and they talked to Mark on the 4th and asked for a couple extra days, and the receipt says the vehicle was removed on the 6th. So it seems to me that they were in compliance.
The letter with the deadline was on the 3rd of December. I know what their notes say.
Our note,
Oh,
that's their
so
notes.
this is not,
Those are
okay,
from the appellant.
okay.
That's why he read the ones.
I gotcha.
Yep. And as Director Ostrowski stated, the notice expired on the 3rd, which was when it was re-inspected.
Okay, and then they didn't call till the next day
Till the
then?
next day.
Okay, gotcha. Made sure, had that clarified.
It was just verbally on the 5th. I have not received a letter on the saying that the 3rd. So,
Director, do you have access to look up those? This may take a little bit because we have to get into a different system. Oh, yeah. Then what I would recommend, Madam Chairman, is that you postpone action on this if you can't determine that you have enough evidence to say whether or not you can.
What did Michael just read us?
The notes from Mark Cordes,
Well, no, a letter.
that wasn't the exact, it wasn't the letter, it was his notes. But I would trust that his notes reflect what was sent in the letter, but that's up to you to decide. You are the committee that gets to rule on this. I would urge you to, if you're not ready to make that decision, postpone action till next month, if you don't believe what the director had been saying.
I would like to propose that we hold off on this until we have a little bit more information in writing of what was stated by Mark Cordes, the neighborhood inspection coordinator.
Okay,
I'll second that motion.
okay. Any further discussion? Yes?
What, oh, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
just wanted to mention that this was close for me. I would have done what Alder Kneebone suggested at first, but it appears that we need to take a quicker or a better look at this, more clarifying look at this. So I would agree to postpone.
Mayor?
And I would, if you're going to postpone, I would ask that you include in that motion whatever information you want. In this case, a hard copy of Mark Cordes's letter or notes, and then maybe a copy of the notice that was sent to the property owner.
Yes, I would.
If there's anything else you want,
Those
now
are
is the
two
time to
things
ask for
I'm
that.
looking for.
Is that good?
Yep, those two items.
Would that be like a second notice letter, or would that just be the first notice letter? 'Cause we only
Any
got-
of them.
All the
We
information.
only
All
got
of them.
one notice letter, never a second notice letter.
Okay.
We don't even have the
Because
first
we were,
one.
we actually
good
were,
question.
we thought that we would have gotten a second notice letter, but it never came.
Okay.
A
Mayor?
question. So in that first notice letter you got, what was the date that was required for you to be in compliance?
it said that it has to be moved by November 15th or
Okay.
16th. I
Okay.
can't remember the date, exact date, but it's been, and then I call him and said that we just got back from vacation,
Oh,
and.
you guys were gone on
Oh.
vacation.
And then he said that, well, then if you, your daughter's gonna find a place to pull out, we give you extended until December 5th. So
Okay.
that's why we didn't get any second letter, we just got the first letter.
Looks like Director Ostrowski might have something too.
Okay, Director?
Typically on extensions, we will not send a second notice out. We'll note it in our system on when the reinspection will occur after that extension, but we typically will not send out another notice. So if the appellant had called and requested an extension, Mark would note that in the system. When that day comes up, he would do his reinspection.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
So quite honestly, it maybe sounds like there might have been some confusion over whether it was the 3rd or 5th. In our system, it was the 3rd. They must have thought that it was the 5th, and since we had went out there on the 3rd, that's why we issued the notice of violation and the service fee.
Okay, thank you. So the motion as it stands is to postpone this until next month and ask for the hard copy of the correspondence between community development and the appellant and the notes from Mark Cordes. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Just for clarification, you will likely not get anything more than the director read at that point then. So if that's still what you want to do, based on the information you were given, then you're welcome to postpone. But it sounds like we will likely not get anything other than what the director read.
I thought he read from his notes, or he read a letter, but he got it from his notes. I'd like to see the notes too,
Okay.
before next meeting.
Okay, but, so what Director Ostrowski said, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director, that was the letter which were Mark Cortes's notes, is that correct?
That is a letter from Mark Cordes that is typically included within your packets. So I read it verbatim of what Mark wrote. So the mayor is correct. You will not receive any other additional information regarding this case.
May I ask the director, could you tell me that what it said in that letter was that the date was, he gave them an extension till the 3rd?
Correct. So a call was received from the owner asking for an extension on the due date of November 16th. So they called on when the original due date was on the 16th, asking for an extension, and the extension was granted until December 3rd. A follow-up inspection occurred on December 3rd, and the vehicle was observed still not to be in compliance.
So Mark would not have any notes that there was an additional phone call or anything else?
I could check the system for any notes and supply that if you wish, but I highly doubt it. Normally, they would just indicate owner called, granted extension to December 3rd, that's it.
So, any notes more will not be able to help us any, is what is being stated.
So, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
To look at
Postpone?
it again or to postpone?
The motion is to postpone with that additional material.
I'd like to, someone else can do it. I don't know if it's worth postponing then at this point. If that's all we're going to get, we're just going to make this longer for both groups. And I think when we have a mistake, a possible mistake like this, with it so close, and it did get taken care of, I'm going to propose that we accept their, what do you call it? I can't think of the right word I want to look.
Appeal?
Appeal.
So, are
Motion
you
on the
withdrawing
floor.
your motion?
I am. I am, because that is the information, as the mayor said, and as Director Ostrowski just said. We have all the information, that's all we're going to get.
Okay.
I'd
So,
like to withdraw my,
withdraw,
So, parliamentarian, correct me if I'm wrong, Robert's rules does not allow for a motion withdrawal. Did he walk out? Are we able to withdraw the motion? I know Robert's rules says that you have to vote on the motion on the floor, but we don't strictly adhere to Robert's rules. What would you recommend in this case? I think the cleanest might be just to vote on the motion to postpone and then get a new motion.
I think without objection from the chair or any member of the body, the motion can be withdrawn by the movement.
Okay.
okay.
I so withdraw my motion to postpone for more information
Okay.
on this.
And that's agreed with the second.
Phillips was the second.
Are there any objections?
What if I don't want to withdraw my second?
You don't have-
Wait, you were the second. I thought she was the second.
No, it was mine, yeah.
Okay, so we need a new motion. Yes.
I would move to uphold the appeal based on.
Grant the appeal.
Grant the appeal based on a little bit of confusion perhaps on both people's parts, and the fact that we do have proof.
We do.
That it was removed within a couple of days. So we'll leave it at that, to grant the appeal.
Okay, motion to grant the appeal. Is there a second?
Yes.
All right, a second by Alder Dugan. Any further discussion from the committee?
But weren't they given plenty of time to remove the car with 2 extensions? Or 1 extension? I thought there was plenty of time to get rid of the car. I mean, that's all I have.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any discussion from the public? The motion is to grant the appeal for 439 Walker Street. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah.
And that motion is approved. Thank you. On to 1C, 2316 Prairie Street. Is the appellant, yeah, come on up. Please
like a
state,
firing squad.
please state your name and address for the record.
Mark Shapansky. I live at 810 Woodview Drive, Stevens Point. Town
Okay.
Hall, actually.
Are there any questions for the appellant from the committee?
I have a question. The address of the property is different. Are you the property owner?
Yes.
And is that your vehicle?
No, that's one of my tenants.
Okay, so your tenants are the ones that had the vehicle there?
Yes, correct.
Gotcha.
Okay. Further questions from the committee? Did you have anything you wanted to add that was not included in the packet?
Oh, definitely. First of all, I thought it was just a couple of people that I was supposed to talk with, didn't realize it was an entire committee over here.
Surprise.
So may not be as prepared over here with my statement as I would like to be. But anyways, I received that $100 fine for a tenant, of course, not parking in a designated area. That was my understanding of what the fine was. I understand that what the deal is, you don't want people parking all over the place in the backyards and causing, bad looks or whatever. But if you look at those pictures that I'm sure you have, that's a driveway that leads directly to the garage in the back. It's been used, I don't want to say 50 years, but I do remember 50 years back, it's been always used as a driveway. When I received the notice from the inspector, Mark Curtis, I apologize if I don't know his name exactly. Those guys are doing a really nice job. But when I saw the picture and I saw the fine, my understanding was that the car, as you see on the picture, was parked a little bit to the side. So I had him move it to the center on the driveway, thinking, what's wrong? The last thing I would have thought about is you can't park in a driveway. I mean, that was my understanding what the fine was, or what the problem was. It does have a gravel base. Not that it makes any difference, because of course it's not the approved way that the city would like to have the driveway to be. Grass is growing there just so it looks better rather than have gravel in it. The fine, once again, was intended for a car being parked not in the wrong place. The fine, or at least an explanation, should have been included that the base of the driveway needs to be improved. And that was I just didn't know about that. It was a misunderstanding between myself and Mark. I was actually misled by the way the letter was given to me, not on purpose. Those guys are doing a great job, as far as I know. Just an explanation what that would have helped. That it was the base of the driveway, not that the vehicle was parked inappropriately in a bad place. It was parked in a driveway. Even in the letter I just received now, Mark was, and even when I spoke with Mark, he said he would love to extend for me to be able to put a base under the driveway so the tenants have a place to park. There's no other place for them to park, but his hands were tied, and it was up to this committee to be able to lift that $100 fine that I have with it. So once again, I'm not asking to change the way people park there, just to give me time to fix the driveway the way it should be.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any further questions from the committee? Yes.
Could I ask a question of Director Ostrowski, please?
Yes, Director, please, thank you.
Hi. Director Ostrowski, I know we just changed the ordinance a little bit recently about the construction of parking spaces, and if we're going to keep them gravel, which we agreed that some people can't afford to do the asphalt. That's why we kept the gravel in with some specifics on what there needed to be. But prior to that, we have allowed gravel as parking lot, and would this not have applied for this one, that although there is a certain condition that how well they're supposed to be kept up so that it's very obvious that it's gravelled, is that the reason behind this, is that it was just that poorly, because it's supposed to be a consistency of a certain amount of inches of gravel so that it's really a strong base Is that the reason?
That's correct. If you look at the picture on page 11, the entire area is grass. You couldn't tell that there would be any gravel base. As you come off the roadway, it kind of looks like it's just mud, and then it goes to the back shed where it's just completely grass. And that is the reason you're allowed to have the gravel driveways as long as they're properly maintained. This one wasn't. I can also read you the initial letter that was sent to the appellant. It says, all vehicles licensed for use on the public roadway must be parked on an approved hard surface. They cannot be parked on the grass or lawn. Please correct prior to the due date. And then it goes into the ordinance citation of driveway and parking areas must be hard surface. All driveways shall be surfaced with asphalt, concrete, or dustless material approved by the administrator and shall be in a smooth, well-graded condition, which was the reason why this one was cited.
Thank you very much for reading that. Appreciate it.
Any further questions from the committee?
Could I add one more thing? Once again, I don't disagree with the fact that it needs to be gravel and properly maintained, but with the notice that I got, to me it was obvious that the vehicle was just parked out to the side. If you look at another picture, I had to move it to the center, and not realizing that the real underlying issue here was the base of the driveway, not that the vehicle was parked in the driveway. Just a simple explanation would have solved that.
Alder Dugan.
I'm confused. I mean,
Yes.
you think that that what you learned was that it was the position of the parking that was off the driveway?
That's what I thought what the problem was.
Why, do you have the letter, that said, yes, that was the problem? Or do you have a letter that said it's the gravel?
What this gentleman actually read was I don't have that letter, that's the exact letter he wrote quote by quote, that he told you what the letter was.
Right,
That
right.
the vehicle is not parked in an approved driveway, an approved surface, on an approved surface
Uh-huh.
that has a proper base. I'm basically, paraphrasing it basically.
Yeah.
So I moved it to put it on the driveway because my understanding was that it wasn't on the driveway, so I had him center it onto the driveway. Did it again, so.
So the problem was that you didn't maintain the gravel
That's what
driveway.
the problem is, yes.
Yes.
It was a gravel, it wasn't a vehicle, not being parked.
Complete confusion there, huh? Yeah.
Misunderstanding. on my
Okay.
part.
And the extension is granted now, you have up until May 31st of this year, correct?
Yes, he did give me an extension.
Okay.
Very, very nice guys to work with down there, so.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. Any further questions or comments? Questions or comments from the public?
I would like to make one more comment, and again, it's just so the public is aware of what happens, why we have to be somewhat tough on a lot of these and adhere strictly to what is said, is because we open ourselves up to other people that can come forward and say the exact same things. I didn't realize this, I didn't have that, and it ends up being where we would probably be repealing things constantly, having those come forward, and it makes it very hard once we open ourselves up one time. And that's the hardest thing that I learned being an alder. When you want to understand someone's point of view and you can see why it happens and also understand now, it's kind of like having to be a lawyer. I don't like it, but you have to realize that what's fair for one has to be fair all the way through. And that is a difficulty. So I want people to understand this. It isn't an easy decision to say to somebody, I'm sorry, but.
Well, there is obviously a garage there, look at a
Right.
picture, and they're driving, reading right to the garage. And there's no other place for any tenants to park.
And they're not saying that you were parked incorrectly. They're saying that you didn't have
Well,
the
that's-
driveway to
right,
code.
Right, I agree.
But you misinterpreted
Yes, well, and that could have been simplified. I had no idea there were changes in the requirements of the gravel of the base. I should have known, right? There's
Well, that
no
hasn't
excuse.
changed,
It
though.
hasn't changed,
You're still in the old requirements, not the new ones that they came up
Then
with.
I
That was
didn't
for
know
new
that
buildings.
any to start with, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure people understood the difference.
So can I call for a motion?
Yes? I'll do it.
Okay,
I hate being the one, but okay. I call that we deny this appeal.
okay. Is there a second? By Alder Dugan. The motion is to deny the appeal for 2316 Prairie Street. All those in favor of denying signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No,
And that is denied. Moving on to item number 2. We have an operator, bartender's license appeal for Bonnie Jean Jasinski. Jaseski. Please come on up and state your name and address for the record.
Name's Bonnie Jean Margaret Jazeski, and it's 241 17th Avenue North, Wisconsin Rapids.
Thank you. Are there any questions about this appeal from the committee for the appellant? Is there anything that you needed to add that wasn't included in the packet information?
I was honest about my charges, but none of them have anything to do with alcohol or anything along those lines. I was wondering if I'd be able to appeal it so that I can still keep my job.
Okay. Any other questions? There.
Maybe we can hear from the police department on the original denial and the guidelines that we have for bartenders' licenses.
So all of you should have a copy of the application, and part of those requirements are that you are not to have a conviction of a felony within 5 years of the time of the application, which, if I understand correctly, the clerk's office did answer that question for Bonnie. A record check did indicate a felony conviction in 2016, and that was the original denial. Actually, some of the felony requirements, and though I know this was redrafted under Chief Morris, the felony requirement actually comes from the state. That is not a council-imposed regulation.
Okay. In the past, we have denied people with felonies regardless of the reason for the felony, correct?
That is correct. It's the level of the offense, not the offense itself.
Thank you, Chief.
And again, that's complying with state guidelines.
Correct.
Chief, at the end of 5 years, anybody who's been convicted of a felony and had no subsequent felonies would then be eligible for
That is correct.
Oh.
a license? Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from the committee?
Can I say something else? I got a bartender's license for Plover. So if that's a state thing, why did Plover allow me to have my license with you, the Stevens Point License?
I cannot speak to what Plover's guidelines or what they rule or do not rule. But these guidelines were drafted under 2 chiefs ago, but the felony restriction comes from part of the state guidelines.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions from the public? And I will bring it back to the
Move to
committee.
deny the appeal.
Motion to deny, is there a second?
I'll second.
A second by Alder Nebone. Any further discussion? The motion is to deny the appeal. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? And that appeal is denied. Thank you for coming. On to item number 3, which is our new operators and bartenders license list. And if there's no objection, I'll do A and B together, B being the provisional manager's license list. Any questions or discussion from the committee? Chief, are there any things we need to know?
Nope.
All right. I'm looking for a motion. Yes?
Go ahead.
What?
I thought you'd raised your hand first.
No,
What?
I was turning my page.
Oh,
I
sure.
move to approve the stuff we just talked about.
I wish I could have thought
Is
of
there a
saying it that way.
second?
I'll second.
All right, so the motion is to approve items 3A and 3B, the license lists. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 4 is the temporary Class B licenses for picnics. We have 4 events, all from Portage County at 1039B Ellis Street here in Stevens Point. For their events, 48 Film Fest on February 17th, the Snow Mountain Movie Night on February 22nd, 11 Amp, Stevens Point Summer Concert Series on June 6th, 13th, 20th, 27th, July 11th, 18th, 25th, and August 1st and 8th of this year, and for Trivia Unplugged on September 22nd. Any questions?
21st.
21st. Thank you. Any comments or corrections?
You're quick.
I would just like to note that I want to thank Portage Create for coming to us with so much time in advance for these, in case there was any problems logistically or with the paperwork. And I will make a motion to approve those licenses. Is there a second? All right. I'll give that to Alder Nabel.
Doesn't matter.
The motion is to approve those licenses. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. On to number 5, change of agent for Ruby Coffee Roasters. We have Kellen Furkey at 725 Franklin Street, replacing Jared Linsmeyer. Any questions, comments?
Move approval.
Motion to approve, second by Alder Bone. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. That is approved. On to number 6. Pawnbroker secondhand jewelry dealer renewal for Lear's Jewelers at 1044 Main Street. Questions, comments?
Just want to note that there's a typo. It should be Leon.
That's what I wondered.
Airs, not LWON. It's just messed up in the agenda, that's all.
Okay. Did I see a hand for a motion there, Alder Dugan?
Yes, I move to approve.
Motion to approve by Dugan. Is there a second? All right, by Nabel. All those in favor of approving that renewal signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? And that is approved. On to item number 7. I would like to do all of these together if that is with no objection. 7A is for the National MS Society's annual walk on September 14th, the map enclosed. B is the Stevens Point Brewery's Point Bach Run on March 2nd. And C is the Stevens Point Police Officers Run from the Cops on September 14th. And those are all events that have occurred already. Anything we know, Chief?
All have been reviewed and again these are effectively annual events in our community.
Perfect. Any questions? Yes.
I'd like to move approval for all 3 of these requests to hold even event street closings.
Perfect. Motion from Alder Nabel. Is there a second? From
I
Alder-
think you should. Runner?
You know, I've done those.
I know.
All right, so the motion is to approve those requests. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And those requests are approved. On to item number 8, our discussion on creating internal guidelines relating to beekeeping. I know we do have several people in the audience and the public that would have thoughts on that. I know this was brought to us, was it actually you, Alder Nabel, or were you just the one who made sure we kept going with it?
I kind of kept pushing to
Yeah.
get it at least discussed.
Okay, do you want to, is there anything you'd like to say to get started with this?
Yeah, actually, I think this is a good idea. I know we have someone keeping hives in the city already. I think we have pollinators that are at risk, and I think if we could incorporate hives with community gardens, I think we build in pollinators for the crops. I've done some research, including joining a Wisconsin Hobby Beekeepers Facebook page. I've gotten a lot of good information from beekeepers. They suggested the Madison ordinance. I do have some copies for the older people on the committee. And I think at this point,
To us.
and I did. I do have some printed out if anybody wants to look at them. But I think it's a good template to look at and see what we want, how we want to facilitate this and make sure that everyone is safe. The beekeepers, the neighbors, the bees themselves. So we can talk about how we'd like to do this going forward, get ideas from the public, and perhaps craft an ordinance that would allow some oversight on the part of this committee because of some of the conditions that would be of concern, not so much with chickens, but with bees because of allergic reactions and things. So that's kind of what what this is all about. It's just a discussion to see how we want to go forward with this, to make this happen.
Attorney Beveridge, did you want to come up and just give us some guidelines as far as how to proceed?
I can't really speak necessarily to any of the sort of, agricultural details of the policy, but just with regards to the procedure of this committee, I know I talked to both of you about this privately, but I think, with chickens, we had such a large volume of requests that it was taking a lot of time to go through them. And from one to the next, the requirements that got imposed were more or less similar. Have a reasonable plan for an enclosure and all that, talk to some of your neighbors, figure it out. But I think there are two factors at play with bees that make them a little different than that. First of all, you're probably not going to have nearly as many requests as you had for chickens. I think your average person is more inclined to have a couple, hens to lay a few eggs rather than bees. It's just a little more accessible, a little less intimidating. But also I think that you have more of a chance that neighbors might be nervous about beekeeping. Whether or not those nervousnesses are actually founded, I think you could have some bigger conflicts there. So what we did with the chickens was set a group of guidelines such that the clerk's office can just look at an application, confirm whether it matches those guidelines, and then go ahead and issue the permit. Whereas with bees, I think having it work that way might be a little hazardous in the sense that you don't get a chance to look at it, hear directly from the people, and custom tailor things or just be a little more sensitive to the individual situations and, dynamics of where the lot lines are, where the neighbors are, all that kind of stuff. So I think that, in any given year, if we might have, 4 to 10 chicken permit applications, I think with bees, you might only have 1, maybe 2, at least at first for a while. And there's no reason why we couldn't, revisit this in the future after a couple seasons of it. But I think having it remain as something that will get individual consideration by this committee, I think that has some value to it.
Thank you. So if I'm understanding correctly, the attorney is recommending that instead of us creating a one-size-fits-all ordinance, he was suggesting that we come up with some, guidelines that we look at on an individual basis, if that's what you guys are. Am I understanding that correct?
Yes, and if you wanted to, you could establish some guidelines via ordinance. You could write some flexibility into that as well. Otherwise, you could establish them via resolution and have it be a document that can be made available to anybody who's looking to apply so that they can know what this committee will be looking at when they come in to be heard on it. But just to preserve some case-by-case flexibility for it.
Thank you. So are we looking to create these guidelines ourselves this evening? Do you want to direct Attorney Beveridge's office to help us create that list by resolution? Do we want to ask him to base this off of City Madison's? Should I take a break to think about that and ask the beekeepers in the public who would like to?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of see what people have to say and then kind of see, but I agree with the city attorney, I think, because people that have relatives or children that may have allergies would be concerned. I think it's reasonable that folks should come to this committee in order to get a permit or approval. But how we craft those rules and what they need to have to comply, that's kind of where we are at this point.
Okay.
You want to know?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I think.
Please do.
I've talked to a lot of my neighbors, and once you pass an ordinance or do something guidelines, and everybody says, they can be next door to me. Yes, they could. What are you voting for something like that for, Mike? Are you crazy? Hurt people, they go to the hospital. Kids get bit by bees, so do grown-ups, whatever. They can be hurt. They are a spooky thing. You go lawnmower next to them, they can get excited. I've talked to a beekeeper who lives out in the Tigerton area, and he told me about them. That's why he has a house in town where he could keep bees. No, he keeps them outside of town, because that's where he says, you're bee farming. It don't belong in a neighborhood, because there's a possibility that one of your bees, which you're bringing in, is going to sting somebody, and they're going to end up in the hospital, And who's gonna pay for that? Here we got another thing coming out. Who's gonna pay for that bee sting?
I think we had this discussion.
I have a
last
lot
time.
of plants in my, where I used to live, and I had no problem with them getting pollinated and having cucumbers or tomatoes or whatever. That was all taking place. I don't know what the big thing is. Government can't be everything for everybody. We should just say no bees in the city. If, I guess some people are here from Wisconsin, moved from Wisconsin Rapids here, and maybe that was the reason why, I don't know. But I think we just say, we can say no sometimes.
Thank you. All right, yes.
I'm curious about the flyway barrier and why 6 feet? And are we talking about swarming or are we talking about individual bees? So it would be interesting to hear more about that.
Oh, from Madison's ordinance?
Yeah, yeah. And secondly, I'm not certain that Alder Phillips, he may have confused wasp and hornet stings with bee stings. I'm not certain that honeybee stings, there aren't many people allergic to them. I'm allergic to wasps and hornets, so I researched this.
Would you be willing to be a test subject?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
But at any rate, it would be interesting to know if that were really a real worry.
I can tell you that I have experienced honeybee allergy. Not me personally,
But you know someone who has.
but yeah, bee stings, that's any bees, really. Bees, wasps, hornets.
And Mayor Wiesa, do you have honeybees on your property?
I do not.
You could.
Okay, I'd like to move on. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak about bees? Come on up. He can go first, and then you can go after. Please state your name and address for the record.
Brian Bolio, 2132 Elk Street. As someone who is allergic to bees, all species of bees, including honeybees,
Really?
I want to agree with Alder Kneebone and Alder Phillips expressing caution going forward. If this does move forward and an ordinance is made, I would like to see some sort of warning sign applied to the residents that would have, hey, there's a bee's nest or a beehive active on this property, so you know to kind of avoid that area. I've been hospitalized probably 4 times from bee stings, so
Ooh.
it's really close to me. I enjoy honey. I have honey every morning in my coffee. I put it on different cereals, whatnot, but as long as there's more caution expressed going forward, because it is a health concern for many people, as with nuts are a health concern for many people. Yeah, that's just what
Thank you.
I got on that.
Come on up, state your name and address. And I would like to note that we're having this discussion because there's nothing right now on the books relating to beekeeping, so we're trying to make sure that this is going to be done in a way that's safe for everyone.
John Lima, live in Point here, 19 years beekeeper,
Address, sir?
508 Meadow.
Thank you.
I think his explanation was ridiculous, but yes, they do sting, but the likelihood of being stung away from the hive is, unless you step on a bee barefoot, they don't sting when they're collecting nectar, unless you grab one with the hand. Are you gonna outlaw dogs? There's dangerous dogs. There's people that don't do dogs right. There's people that don't do bees right. I would probably check into Madison to see how their ordinance worked. It sounded like a reasonable ordinance in the city of Madison, see if they've had trouble. Also, there is insurance for beekeepers for liability on their bees, especially for the commercial keeper. I've done it 19 years, never had any problem whatsoever because I monitor my bees. I know what I'm doing. If you're careless with your bees and kick the hive and you might get stung. I mean,
Don't do that.
yeah. So, I've never had trouble, I've never had neighbors complain. I'm new to the city, I've been here 4 years now. So, any questions about bees?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
Alder Dugan?
Yeah, do you have the bees in your yard on Meadow Street?
Yes, it's completely fenced in.
Uh-huh.
Nobody's gonna know they're there.
Except everybody watching now.
Well, yeah, if they wanna watch, it's fine.
Well, you have to have a permit to have bees in
I
the city.
checked the ordinances, I didn't see any permit requirement. Is it in this? There were some archaic agricultural,
Uh-huh, and that's
all
where.
I saw in this.
I'm sorry, getting into a debate here,
Yeah,
but
I kept them in the city in southern Wisconsin, and there were no regulations whatsoever.
do me a favor and call my office tomorrow, call the mayor's office. I'd like to
Okay.
talk to you about it. I can explain some of that stuff.
Okay?
Other questions here?
I do have bees out in the country also.
All right.
Do you have any more questions?
Yes, I was just going to ask you, how many bees do you have?
I mean, what, hives?
Yeah, hives, I'm sorry.
Individual bees.
I've got
Count
more
every
in-
one of them.
I've got 4 right now in town, but I brought some in just to keep over winter so I can watch them, feed them. But they go back out in the country. I generally only keep 1.
I just wanted to say, I appreciate your point about, and I think that my concern always has been, is that when people don't know what they're doing, they decide to just get into the newest fad and want to just, I can do this and read up on a little few things, and then they set up a business doing it of their own, I mean, for a hobby, can become the biggest issue out of all of this. So I think we do really need to have something on the books. I think it's very important, and I think it needs to be a permit. Doesn't have to be an expensive permit, it just needs to be enough to be able to have it record. And knowing that somebody has either insurance or have taken a class on it or something. I think that's really important, so, thank you.
Alder Jennings, and I know has a question as well, or a comment, question? Comment, come on up.
Thank you.
Tori Jennings, Alder District 1, to Alder Phillips' comments. Apparently, the bees in Stevens Point are incredibly aggressive. They must be, because given that this is around the state, around the country, around the world, and there's I think this has been hashed out a lot. Also, this is an attempt to deal with the decline in pollinators and to compensate for that. So we have this extreme decline in pollinators, so people are trying to boost that population. Every year I have wasps build nests on my house. Are we going to have the police go around and regulate those out of existence? I don't think so. We do live in a natural world, and it's just some of these reactions that this is so scary, to the point that was made by the last discussant. He's an expert. He's done this. He's not too worried about it. Thank you.
Yep. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name's Kerry Taubman, 11 Ridgewood Drive. I also have bees. I've had bees for the last 5 years, and I think there's a lot of confusion here. First of all, as far as, bees, yellow jackets, wasps, completely different bees. Honeybees are not aggressive. In the time that I've had bees, the only person who ever got stung is myself, and it's usually because of my own fault. I looked at, the other thing too, you mentioned as far as fear of bees and reactions to them. Remember, bees occur naturally in our environment. Whether your neighbor has hives, you're going to have bees. And if you have flowers, I don't care where you live, you will have bees present on your property. Madison does have some rules. They're actually fairly straightforward. It's not very complicated, but it's fairly simple, and I think it's probably quite effective for them. It's, again, it basically keeps people from walking in front of these hives. They gives a certain amount of distance they have to be from buildings. Again, I say these are not aggressive animals. No beekeeper is going to keep bees that are aggressive. It's just not worth the trouble then. So, but again, I say the simple rules that they've instituted there are, I say, fairly straightforward, and I think would pretty likely to result in any, no danger, no unusual danger to anybody in the vicinity then, so. So I think some degree of regulation is one thing, but I think, again, to say that it shouldn't be allowed, I think would be inappropriate. And again, like I say, anybody, yeah, you could have some reaction, you can, anything, but bees are gonna be there. You're not getting rid of bees because you tell your neighbor you can't have hives in this yard there, so.
Thank you.
That's-
I recall from our previous conversation, wondering if someone gets stung by a bee, how do we know whose bee it is?
You ask it.
Is it, I mean, this is getting, kind of insane. You can't enclose them in and know where these bees came from. Mayor?
So just a couple of comments. I was referring to the current ordinance on the books. It says something basically about any animal being raised for food or fiber is prohibited in the city without a permit. Because chickens lay eggs and you eat the eggs, or bees have honey, you eat the honey. That is what constitutes the farm animal and the need for permits. So we do have something on the books right now prohibiting that. Judging it on a case-by-case basis, though, I think is appropriate, at least starting out, to address the concerns, and I'm not allergic, so I can't speak for anyone who has those allergies, but I imagine it's a little terrifying when you go into anaphylactic shock, and it's a $600 EpiPen.
I can't imagine.
But regardless, something that I would suggest is that if an applicant wants to keep bees, set a perimeter, 200 yards, 500 yards, and notify all of the property owners within there, similar to what we did with chickens, where all the surrounding neighbors had to agree to it. That way you will know if someone is allergic to the bees, and if they have a serious objection, you can deal with that from the whatever applicant it is, if it's warranted. That way you protect a little bit of the public safety, so people are aware of it and have some say. And if they disagree with having the hive 2 houses down from them because of safety reasons, you can take that into consideration. If everybody happens to agree and you set some other guidelines, just like in the Madison ordinance, I really don't see much of a problem with allowing this, but considering it at least on a case-by-case basis for now, until we can establish things that people are comfortable with. I don't think bees are spooky, scary, but again, I am not allergic, so I can't give you that perspective.
Thank you. So going forward, is the most efficient use of our time going to be inviting the local beekeeping folks in with someone from the committee to make these guidelines and hash this out? Attorney Beveridge, do you have a recommendation on that? I would like to get something done soon before bee season, I guess.
I think in terms of creating, just draft guidelines or any sort of draft documentation, it's certainly something I can work with the clerk's office on.
Okay. Well, yes.
No need to even move to do that. We can put something together for
Okay.
consideration.
Sir, we need you up at the microphone, please. You'd be surprised what this does and doesn't pick up.
All right.
It picks up
Kerry
pretty good.
Talkman again. Why don't, rather than go through the whole process, why don't you just talk to the city of Madison, who's been through it, has given their guidelines, and find out what the result has been? Have there been
Right.
problems? Have there been conflicts? If it's worked well, then, like I say, their guidelines are fairly straightforward. They're fairly simple. I think there's probably like 6 of them.
We've got a copy of them right here. I'll send you one.
Yeah, I
Suggested
mean, it just
that.
would probably save a lot of time and effort, a suggestion.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Please come up and state your name and address for the record.
Polly Dalton, 1579 Church Street.
Don't touch it.
Sorry, it's
Sorry.
magic. I just like to come with the experience of having moved here from Appleton, where my partner actually put forth the language that initially allowed people within the city of Appleton to start beekeeping on educational and institutionally zoned land, with the intention being that educational nonprofits and the university could keep them. 2 years later, while I was on the council, I put forth the language and regulation that was approved with very little to basically zero opposition within the community to allow for residential beekeeping. A lot of the parameters that were set, notification of neighbors, where I would also recommend not giving neighbors veto power, because I think that starts to infringe upon individual property rights, which I am not supportive of, and then allowing, a small setback. And I would echo Alder Nebel's point about keeping the fee for a limit pretty low, because the investment necessary to begin beekeeping involves self-education of time and a lot of investment in just the equipment and the bees themselves. And so putting a higher economical burden on it doesn't necessarily encourage it. And the mayor brought up the point, not just protecting the citizens, but if you do implement this and you're looking to protect the bees, you might want to consider whether or not the city's parks and rec are actually spraying herbicides, which they do, which are not only detrimental to bees, but they have to post signs that say children can't play on this grass. So that might be something to look at a little closer.
Thank you. Okay, so we don't need a motion on this? Yep.
I have a contact from constituent that she wanted read into the record, since she can't be here, from Wendy Dolan, 318 Washington Avenue. She had come before us because she's got some hives, so I contacted her to let her know we'd be talking about this tonight. Dear Alderperson Nebo, thank you for letting me know about the meeting tonight. As I am unable to attend, I'm sending my comments to you. I am in support of a beekeeping ordinance in Stevens Point. Thank you so much, Wendy Dolan. So I've got copies of that. And the Madison ordinance does kind of, they clarify based on zoning districts. So in a residential zoning district, for example, Madison allows no more than 6 hives, or 20 cubic feet in volume, or closer than 3 feet from a property line, or 10 feet from a sidewalk. So we do have plenty of examples out there that are working, and I think we can tweak something from what's out there that will work for Stevens Point, so.
Thank you. Alder Phillips.
I guess my comment would be, in this ordinance form, I talk to a lot of people in my district, a lot of people, and they don't want it. So I would like the ordinance to include no beehives allowed in a tent district.
Well, when this comes back for discussion, we will address that. Mayor?
Not exactly related, but I need to clear up some misinformation. I'm going to ask Director Schrader to come up here. There was a comment made that we use harsh chemicals on our parks, lawns, and things like that, and I just want to have the director come up and clarify that, so we don't start
I'm
getting a
not
panic.
sure. We use some Roundup along fence lines, but we haven't sprayed under playgrounds, so I don't know where that. The tennis courts, yeah, not the playgrounds. We were probably doing the fence lines. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I wanted to clear that up too.
Okay, right, because that's, parks
you, Director.
are safe.
Okay. Without any further questions, comments?
Brian Bolio, 2132 Elk. I agree that setting perimeters and stuff and letting neighbors know within a certain vicinity is a good idea. And although I'm allergic to bees, I see the benefit of having these artificial hives that people have. I have extensive gardens in the summer, a lot of hanging plants and whatnot that need the pollination. So if there's a notification process when somebody applies for a bee permit to notify the neighbors on that block where that home is or that resident is, that would be great. But I would also, as I said earlier, like to see some sort of sign on the person's property saying, hey, there's an active beehive here, just so you know, take caution.
Thank you.
Actually, I have a question. Do you think a sign would encourage, like, curious small children? Do you think it would be an
I
attractive
don't know, you
nuisance
see
for
the
them?
beware of dog signs and it usually keeps people away, so, you know, if you see somebody that's got a beware of dog sign, they'll normally walk away from that property.
Dog usually will come right up the fence and show itself. Bees in a hive might not.
It's just,
I'm-
for somebody that has an allergy to it, it's something that I'd like to see, you know. We keep nuts out of schools because kids have allergies to nuts. So we keep firearms and weapons out of these buildings because it's a public safety thing. So it's just something I would personally like to see. Like I said, I'm in favor of seeing these artificial hives, but just go through a notification process. That way it's not just, all right, I'm going in for a permit, here you go, you know,
Okay,
thanks.
thank you. So, Alder Nebo, and I'll have you work with Attorney Beverages and
I'll
possibly
be happy to.
the clerk's office as we go forward for that. With that, we're moving on to item number 9. We are adjourned at 7:26.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.